It's Thursday, October the 27th. Lake level's about 909 and a half, which is about 5.5 feet below normal winter pool. Didn't seem like it, it come up a couple inches from the rain, not as much as I thought it would have, but I think the ground was just so dry. It was a slow soaking rain, so most of it probably soaked into the ground. But, yesterday I went out to test some new prototype baits that I got from Spro. Well, actually on the water temperature too. I put in at the mid-James yesterday, and it was about 64, 65 degrees. And the further up in the river I went, the colder the water got. And I got into some 57, 58 degree water temperature. But I started out in the mid-James, and they've got a couple new crankbaits that they sent me some prototypes to try. And what it is, it's a Rock Crawler 50 DD. Now you'll notice this is the original Rock Crawler 55 behind it. This is a lot smaller bodied bait, and it's got a little deeper build. The bait will get down there and run real consistently about 12, 13 feet. I had real good luck with them running, right out of the package. Didn't have to tune them or anything. And I'm kind of excited about this bait. I think when them fish get up there where we can catch them on a crankbait, or at least I haven't found them up there real good yet, it's going to be a good little bait. It's a lot different than the 55 and a little bit different than a wiggle wart. It'll go down a little deeper and a little smaller profile bait. They got some really awesome colors. This one I got on here is a BP 37. But they got a lot of the same colors that they've got in the regular Rock Crawler 50s and 55s. But get a chance, you need to check them out. It's a Rock Crawler 50 DD. And so I started out in the mid-James. I was flipping some boat docks, cranking some bluffs. And it seems like if I get on them vertical bluffs where there's little rock slides, that's where the crankbait was working for me a little bit. Seemed like I had to have a little cut or, like I say, a rock slide. And I was just kind of paralleling the bluff. A lot of times the bait wasn't hitting the bottom because on them vertical bluffs it was pretty deep. Some of the fish were suspended. But I caught several little fish on it. I haven't really got into any good ones yet on the crankbait. But I think as this water's starting to cool down, I am seeing the bait starting to migrate back into creeks. I actually seen quite a few gulls yesterday. Now, the other bait I was playing with is a Dean Rojas, a Speed Demon 55. And I went way up in the river to actually look for shad and to play with this little square bill. But it works off the cover, bounces off the stumps, and you can run it right through the center of a brush pile. You can burn the bait, it doesn't roll. It's got really good action. It'll run down about 3 to 5 feet, depending on what line size. I was throwing it on 14-pound line, so I was, I could consistently get it down there 3 to 4 feet. But it runs real good. It's going to be a good little bait as well. Now I did find, like I say, a lot of shad in the backs, about 3/4 of the way back in some of the creeks. Still not finding a lot of fish with them, but what fish I did catch underneath them was on a 3/4 ounce jigging spoon and a little swim bait. And a lot of times this time of year, instead of throwing like a paddle tail swim bait, I like to throw, this is a big bite, it's a jerk minnow, similar to like a Demiki rig. And depending on how deep I'm fishing it, I'm throwing it on a 3/8 ounce, a big bite head. And what I like about the big bite head is for a pretty heavy head, it's got a small 3/0 finesse hook. A lot of times you get a bigger head and it's got a bigger hook that kind of dwarfs the bait. But this is a 3/8, and I was fishing down about 30 feet. And I'm basically just finding the shad on my live scope, on my Garmin live scope, and visually fishing for fish that are underneath the shad. And another good bait, and it's going to be all winter long, is the Rapala ice fishing jig. And I'll kind of mix the ice fishing jig up along with like a slab spoon. And a lot of the bait I found was in the timber in the center of the creeks. But you could see some fish underneath the shad, and we caught a couple good keeper largemouths. Actually caught a walleye on the spoon, and I was throwing a Rapala ice fishing jig as well. Both of these I'll just kind of mix it up along with the spoon, and they got 3 different sizes. I usually throw the 7/8 ounce, but they do make a 5/8 ounce, and then they've got a real little small one when the fish get really finicky. I don't know what size this is. It's probably about a 1/2 ounce or 3/8 or 1/2 ounce. But it can be a real good, especially with the size of the shad. They're real small, a lot of the schools that I'm finding. But on the ice fishing jig, a lot of times I'll vertical fish it, more like a drop shot rig instead of real aggressive jerks with the spoon, like I do with the spoon. But I will also cast into these schools of shad, and normally you can see when there's active fish in them shad, you'll see a big school of shad with a hole in the center and 1 or 2 dots in the middle. That's usually fish feeding in that, or you'll see them down underneath the school of shad. Now, a few of the fish we caught yesterday were real tight to the pole timber, so we had to work the baits down alongside the trees and down to the base of them. But it seemed like yesterday my bites were about 22 to 28 feet deep, pretty close to the bottom. And I was just idling in the backs of these deeper creeks, and I had to go in 4 or 5 of them till I finally started, finding some bait. But a good sign was also the gulls are starting to show up. A lot of times you can see these gulls out in the center of the creeks, and that's a good place to start idling around to find these. But other than that, the drop shot bite has still been pretty good. There's still a thermocline in the lake, but it should be breaking up. Up in the river, it's broke up because the water's cooled down enough, but the main lake's still in the mid-60s. But I think anytime within the next week or so, we should see that thermocline start to break up, which is actually going to scatter a lot of them fish, and I'm hoping that some of them that have been out there in the middle are going to come up shallower, where we can catch them on a crankbait, maybe a spinnerbait, jig. But it did catch a few fish on boat docks yesterday, about 8 to 10 feet deep on a 5-fish lures ultimate finesse jig. Crawdad pattern seemed to work, and it seemed to work better earlier in the morning. Later in the day, I went back to the docks and really struggled to get bites, but it seemed like that was more of an early bite for me. But for the most part, I'm really having to junk fish. I mean, I got a lot of different rods on the deck. There's no real set pattern other than maybe, the drop shot. We're still catching quite a few fish on a drop shot. Problem is, a lot of days with the drop shot, you'll see a whole lot more fish than you'll catch. They'll come up and look at the bait, but they seem to be out there on the gravel flats on the main lake, anywhere from 28 to some as deep as 45 feet. Now, once that thermocline breaks up, probably going to see some of them fish going down to 50, 55 feet, and hopefully we'll see a good concentration of them move shallow, because once that thermocline breaks up, there's not going to be any specific area in the water column that's got more oxygen. When that lake goes to turnover, it's going to mix that oxygen up, so there's not going to be, like I say, a set comfort zone for the fish, so it usually scatters them out quite a bit. But other than that, I think the fishing is pretty tough, fall fishing, but what's getting ready to be really good, I believe, is the deep fish out in the centers of these creeks, on the little swim baits, the Demiki rigs, spoons, and ice fishing jig. I think the colder it gets, the stronger that bite's going to get. It just depends how far, when these fish are starting to migrate back into creeks. If they get way back up there and get shallow, it'll be a good shallow bite. And one thing I haven't seen too that I've been looking for is the big gizzard shad. Whenever we start getting them up on them chunk rock banks, you'll see them up there. I guess they eat the algae and stuff off the rocks. But if we start seeing them, the whopper plopper bite may come back on. It seemed like the best plopper and buzzbait bite was more in September. As we got into October, it seemed to kind of fade away. But if them big gizzard shad will get moving up against the bank again, we may see a buzzbait bite, whopper plopper, and even a big glide bait will come into play. So until next week, good luck, good fishing.